Hi there, Sugar Snaps. If you have a bunch of scrap fabric sitting around and you want a fun project, something that is sustainable and useful, you can make beeswax wraps. That is a piece of fabric that you cover with beeswax and a few other oils, and you can use them as food storage or snack storage. Today I want to show you how to do a flat wrap as well as create a pouch for snacks and storing other food items. So to start out, let's go over some of the materials and tools you'll need. First, I have a piece of 100% cotton. This is quilter's cotton. I have cut out the size that I want. This is a smaller piece for smaller food storage. I have a piece of parchment paper that's a little bit bigger than the piece of fabric I'll be waxing, and that's laid underneath your fabric to keep the wax off your work surface. A 1-inch or larger paintbrush. These are the disposable paintbrushes. You can use this and then store it for future uses, redoing the wax on your beeswax wraps, because it will need a bit of an update every once in a while. A tongue depressor or popsicle stick for mixing your materials. I have a pot here on my hot plate. You can also do this on a stove with a glass jar inside, and there's a little bit of water in there, just enough to create a bit of a double boiler. And I have that set to a medium heat so that the water doesn't boil, but it's hot to start to melt the beeswax and the other materials. And a digital scale and a small bowl for measuring out your beeswax and your other materials. I found the recipe that I'm using today on Mountain Rose Herbs. I'll put the link in their original blog post in the description below. They use a beeswax, the little pellets, as well as some jojoba oil and pine resin, and that makes a really nice finish and really quality beeswax wrap for storing food. So mixing these three together, and I'll also include the recipe in the description below. Okay, so start out by heating the water in your pot. And as you can see, it's starting to heat and steam. So I'm gonna turn it down so that it maintains heat without boiling. I don't wanna get water in my wax as I'm mixing it. And then I'm going to take my scale and set it to 0 when the bowl is on it. So put your bowl on your scale and then tare it so that it sets to 0, and then use the little bowl to measure out your ingredients. And so I'll start with the resin and pour the resin into my double boiler first, because it takes the longest to melt. And I'm going to do 0.35 ounces. So make sure that your scale is set to ounces and pounds so that it will read correctly, and then pour in some pieces until it starts to read. 4 ounces, and then I'll take out a few pieces to get to the, or 0.3 ounces. Okay, so there's the resin, and I'll pour that into my double boiler right here. And then replace your bowl, and we'll do the beeswax pellets. Pour 1.25 ounces. There we go, and then pour that into your pot. And then measure out a tablespoon of the jojoba oil. Now use your tongue depressor or popsicle stick to stir the mixture in your double boiler until it begins to be completely liquid. And the pine resin is pretty sticky, and so it will want to stick to the bottom of your pot. Just work at it until it mixes with the rest of the ingredients. Stir it until it's all mixed together. And this takes a couple minutes of stirring and watching to make sure that it evenly combines. So while that is melting, you can set your work surface up for your first beeswax wrap. Now for wrap, I typically would wash the fabric before I create the wrap so that you remove any sizing if there is any, or any dirt or oils that's on it before you put the wax on. And then this one, 2 sides I serged, 2 sides are unserged, just to show the fact that if you finish the edges with a serger, it works great, but you can also leave them raw and the wax will hold the fibers together so that it doesn't fray. So either way works well for beeswax wraps. So you can choose how you want to finish. You can also finish the edges with pinking shears once the wax is applied, and that will finish off your edge. Add a bit of a decorative edge to your piece. So I'll check on this here. And if you're going to use make beeswax wraps regularly, you can set aside a mixing bowl and your tools to be specifically for making beeswax wraps, and then you can reuse them, because removing the wax from things can be challenging. So using a paintbrush that's designated for creating beeswax wraps, and stir sticks, and potentially even the bowl that you melt the wax in. So while we're waiting for the wax to finish melting, a couple ways that you can use these is food storage. Making your own beeswax wraps make great gifts, because you can use any type of 100% cotton print. So you can go to the fabric store and search the quilting section and personalize the beeswax wraps to the person that you're going to give them to. It's a fun project to do with family, with kids. If you watch them carefully with the hot wax, they can have fun brushing it onto the fabric, and then you can roll them up and package them really pretty, and they make a fun present. They're also super sustainable because you can use them over and over again, and you'll just wipe them down once you've used it once with a little bit of soap and a rag, and then if it needs a refresh of the wax, you can have just a little bowl of your wax already mixed somewhere stored in your kitchen with your brush. Just heat up the wax really quick and refresh the wax on the surface of your wrap whenever it needs it. Okay, so the wax is all melted except for the pine resin, and the resin likes to stick to the end of your mixing stick until the very end. So keep it in your pot heating up until that resin becomes a liquid as well. I'll put a link to the materials in the description below. You can get most of the items from Mountain Rose Herbs on their online catalog. The pine resin I got from a Etsy shop, Northern West Stuff, and I'll put a link to that as well. That is something that Mountain Rose Herbs does not currently carry. Okay, I think we have melted wax, and so it'll look like this when it's mixed and melted. And stir it up just to make sure that that pine resin is stirred into the wax and the jojoba oil nice and evenly. Okay, so now use your brush, and this brush I've used before, so I need to stick it in the wax, in the warm wax, to kind of heat up the wax that's currently on there. So I'll just brush it around in here until it softens up, and it's pretty quick to do that. So I'm going to turn my hot plate down to a 1 just to keep it warm, and then start to brush this onto your surface. And I'll work from one side to the other, brushing it on in a light layer from one corner to the other. And I'm just dipping the brush in and then brushing it over the surface until it starts to show that it's drying, and then I'll put my brush back in and get more wax. And you want to get the edges really well. And once it's applied to the fabric, it dries pretty quickly. So it will look like it's just sitting on the surface of the fabric. You'll be putting this in an oven to heat up the whole the whole piece of fabric all at the same time, and then we'll dab off any excess. So don't worry about it bleeding into the fabric just yet. We'll make sure that happens. Okay, and then once you've done the whole thing, you can lift it off the parchment paper, and you'll see on the other side where the wax came through and where it's just sitting on the surface. And that's why we put it in the oven for a few seconds or a few minutes to make sure that the wax bleeds through all the way to the other side so that both sides are equally coated. And then we'll dab off any excess. So heat your oven to 200 degrees or the lowest temperature that your oven will go to, and let that preheat, but you can throw this in right away. Put this on a cookie sheet on top of the parchment paper you were using, and allow it to sit in there. Check on it every few minutes until the whole surface looks wet. And then we'll come back together and dab up any excess oils and wax. Okay, so I have this pulled out from the oven. It's started to stiffen up already, but you'll want to dab off any of the excess. So I have a piece of fabric that I'm going to make a pouch beeswax wrap from. So I'm gonna stick this on here and press it down to pick up any of the excess wax. And then flip this one over and do the same thing on the other side. So the wax has bled through the material and now is equally on both sides. And you'll want to pick up wax off of the parchment paper as well. But your piece is fully waxed. Both sides have an equal coating of wax, and there isn't any areas on the surface where there's clumps of wax, so it's nice and smooth on both sides. So now you can roll this up or fold this up and store this in the space that you keep your saran wrap or your tin foil, and use this instead of saran wrap, tin foil, or a container. You can actually wrap food straight into it, create a little envelope by folding the corners in over your food and then storing it like that in your fridge, or even tying a string around it to hold it in place. And you can make a number of these in different sizes for different purposes. So now I'll show you how to create a beeswax wrap pouch. So we've already started to lift off some wax from the last one, and now we're going to go in and just do the edges really quick with some fresh wax, and then go through the same process, putting it in the oven, allowing it to heat. I picked up quite a bit of wax from this first one, so I might not need a full waxing. Won't have to run the paintbrush over the whole thing, but just kind of spot wax it and catch the edges to make sure that they are well waxed. This one doesn't have any seam or serged edges, so I want to catch the edges so that they don't fray. And then catch any spots that look dry. Okay, and that is the first part of the waxing. Now we'll put this in the oven again and do the same blotting and more evenly spreading the wax out with the heat of the oven. But I want to go over how to size the piece for your beeswax pouch. And the way I did that was creating a little pouch by folding over one side and then folding down another to get the shape that I wanted. And I want about 1.5 inches of a lip at the top here that will fold over, and then this will fold over again, and there will be Velcro here for it to be closed, and we'll sew the sides up to enclose the pouch and create rounded corners. Cutting off the sharp corner and creating rounder corners will mean that it will be easier to clean out your wrap between uses. So washing it out with a little bit of soap and cool water will be easier if you round your corners. But for now, just choose a large rectangle piece, fold it up, have 1.5 inches of an overlap for the lip, and you'll create your envelope pouch. So go ahead and throw this in the oven and do the blotting process like we did earlier, and then I'll show you how to sew up the sides, finish off the top edges, and add the Velcro. To make a pouch out of the beeswax fabric, you'll want your fabric and some Velcro pieces. Here I have some adhesive backed Velcro circles. I am going to use these because the sticky on the back will help me to stick them onto the material, and then I can sew them down to just firmly attach them to the fabric. You can also start out with a Velcro that doesn't have adhesive on the back if you want to go ahead and use that type of material, but this is what I have. A pair of sharp scissors, these are fabric scissors. Once we have sewn up the edges, I'm going to go over the edges with beeswax again to seal any of the stitches and seal the edges so that they're waterproofed, or at least food safe proof, so that it blocks out any airflow. So like I went over earlier, I'm going to fold up my pouch, leaving 1.5 inches here at the top to create a flap. I'm going to go a little bit less. So we'll have this fold over, and then we'll put the Velcro onto the fold over flap, and then right here, and that will fold over. So we'll create kind of an envelope shape like this with the fabric. So once you have established the size and shape that you want, I'm doing a long rectangle here, then you'll go in and we're going to curve out the corners. And you can use a lid of some sort to draw in the corner for you. For instance, you could use a plastic lid, place it onto the corner, and then use that to trace in your corner like so. Just pressing a pencil into the corner to create that curve, or you could just go in and eyeball it like so. But to match, keep them even, I'm gonna do this with the lid. Okay, so draw in those corners, and then using your scissors, cut away the fabric to create that curve. So there you have a curved bottom edge. So this is your folded side. That's the bottom of the bag. And then you have your walls and the little flap that'll be at the top here, and your opening. So the next step is to serge this closed. So serge the sides and serge the edge of the flap in order to finish it off. Because this is pre-waxed, it might cause a little bit of gunk of buildup in your needles on your sewing machine. You could always hand stitch this with a needle and thread by just sewing a tight seam around the edge and then doing the wax over top of that. I'm going to serge the edge, and I'll show you how to do that now. Okay, I'm going to start in the bottom corner and serge around the side, the top of the flap to finish it off, and around to the other side and end at the second corner. So starting here, leave a nice tail at the end of your serger to start out with, and begin. And when you need to turn, you will come to the edge of the fabric and then keep the needles in the fabric, turn the material, and put your foot back down. trim down the ends so that there's a little bit of a tail, and we'll kind of glue those down with the wax. And that's your serged pouch. So I've serged the outside edges, the sides, and into the bottom of my food pouch, and now I need to seal those off to hold the stitches in place so that they don't untangle, and to seal the pouch so that it's food worthy. So I'll take my paintbrush, and just going around the edges, I'm going to put some wax over the stitches on one side, like so, and then flip it over and do the other side as well. And do that all the way around your pouch. Be sure to catch the ends at the bottom where you started off, and put wax over the ends so that they're folded into the pouch and the wax holds them down. So I'm pressing the wax over, kind of like glue, to hold them in place. Now you'll put this on a tray with parchment paper. So I'll lay my parchment paper on a baking sheet, place this in the oven at 200 degrees, and allow it to heat so that the wax slightly melts so that it looks shiny on the material. And then pull it out, and right away use either a paper towel or another piece of fabric to dab up the wax. Again, if you use another piece of fabric, you're going to want to turn that into another beeswax wrap, because once the wax attaches to the fabric, it will be harder to remove it. It's hard to remove the wax even with water. So. When you have taken your pouch out of the oven and dabbed off all of the excess, like I just showed you, your pouch will harden rather quickly once it's removed from the heat. So making sure that you've dabbed on the inside like I showed you is really good, because then you won't have clumps of wax on the inside as well. So now we can put on the Velcro circles onto the flap so that we have a closure system. You're going to fold your flap over so that it's closed for the first fold. Take some of your Velcro, and we're going to apply it to the outside of the flap. So once it's folded over, we're going to do it on top there. So let's put the fuzzy side on the flap, and we're going to do in 3 places. So on the outside, and then one in the middle. And press them down firmly so that you're attaching the adhesive to the fabric. And then we'll place these, place the other side down where you want it to go by folding over once again and gauging where you want the Velcro to go, putting it in place. So the way I'm doing that is by folding it over and then bringing my circle, the mate, to the first piece of Velcro and placing it right under where this first one will land on the outside. So folding over, gauging where to place it, and then placing that down and pressing firmly down. And so we can test that out by folding it over and attaching the Velcros to hold them in place. looks like some of them are just peeling off of the wax, which is to be expected because it's not a fiber material anymore, it's a wax material. So we'll go in and using a sewing machine, or again you can use hand stitching, we'll go create a sewn X over the Velcro. Okay, so here is your pouch with the Velcro on. To close it, you'll fold over the flap and then fold that over and attach the Velcro. And now you have a flapped pouch to store your snacks in or other food items. And you can make these larger, smaller, depending on the size of the fabric. Like I went over earlier, how you size your fabric. Another thing you can do to ensure that your food stays more airtight is by putting a piece of Velcro, a strip of Velcro all the way down the top of the flap and along the edge here. And if you did that, I would suggest putting the Velcro down where you want it to land and then sewing the sides up. So when it's completely flat, then it'll be easier to attach the Velcro and then serge the sides up or sew your sides up. And then your Velcro will be in place and you will have a pouch ready to go. Thanks for watching how to create beeswax wraps and beeswax wrap pouches. I hope you get to try this and make your own sustainable food wrap or make these as gifts. Like this video because it helps me make more and better videos. I'll see you next time. Bye.